24 seasoned military pilots stranded in hostile territory, their aircraft damaged beyond repair, no rescue coming. The only person who could bring them home, a 23-year-old woman they dismissed as just the maintenance girl. What happened? Next would rewrite the rules of naval aviation forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Selena Rodriguez emerged from the pre-dawn fog like a phantom, her steel-toed boots clicking against the wet tarmac in a rhythm that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. While most of the base still slept, she was already 30 minutes deep into what others called her obsession, a meticulous inspection routine that would make a Swiss watchmaker look careless at 23. Selena possessed the kind of understated competence that made people forget she was in the room. Her grandmother had always said she had quiet hands, fingers that could coax life from broken things without fanfare or drama. Those hands now traced the sleek hull of an FA-18 Super Hornet, feeling for stress fractures that instruments might miss, checking rivets that maintenance protocols said were fine, but her instincts suggested needed attention. The pilots called her Rodriguez when they remembered to acknowledge her at all. To them, she was part of the scenery, useful when their million-dollar jets needed fixing, invisible when they didn't. What they never bothered to learn was that Selena knew their aircraft better than they knew their own children. The weight of legacy Selena's relationship with aviation ran deeper than professional duty. Her father, Captain Miguel Rodriguez, had been a Navy test pilot whose innovations in emergency flight procedures had saved countless lives before his own. F-14 Tomcat disappeared over the Pacific during a classified mission when Selena was 12. He'd left behind boxes of flight manuals, technical diagrams, and handwritten notes about aircraft behavior under extreme conditions, materials that became Selena's bedtime reading throughout high school, while her classmates dreamed of prom, dresses, and college parties. Selena absorbed everything about aerodynamics, engine efficiency, and emergency protocols. She'd inherited her father's analytical mind and her mother's stubborn determination, a combination that made her approach maintenance with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of an artist. The Coronado Naval Air Station wasn't just any military installation. It served as the primary training facility for the Navy's most elite fighter squadrons, the breeding ground for pilots who would eventually join the Blue Angels or lead carrier strike groups into hostile waters. The aircraft here weren't just machines. They were the pinnacle of American engineering, each one worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Selena's maintenance bay sat in the shadow of Hangar 7, where the station's premier squadron, the Iron Eagles, kept their 12 FA-18 Super Hornets. Led by Commander Jake Stevens, a hotshot pilot with movie star looks and an ego to match, the Iron Eagles represented everything glamorous about naval aviation. They flew the newest aircraft, received the most challenging missions, and basked in the admiration of junior pilots who dreamed of joining their ranks. Commander Stevens treated aircraft maintenance like a necessary evil, something that happened while he wasn't around to be bothered by the details. His attitude trickled down through his squadron, creating an environment where maintenance personnel were treated as service staff rather than the technical specialists they actually were. The underground education, what the Iron Eagles didn't know, was that Selena had been conducting her own advanced education in naval aviation. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, after the flight line went quiet and the pilots retreated to the officers' club, she slipped into the base's flight simulation center. The facility officially closed at 1800 hours, but Selena had befriended Master Chief Patricia Williams, the gruff but fair-minded NCO who oversaw base operations. Chief Williams had served with Selena's father and recognized the same intense dedication in his daughter. She'd quietly arranged for Selena to have after-hours access to the simulators, officially for maintenance familiarization, but really because she understood that some people needed to chase their father's ghost through digital skies. Over 18 months, Selena had logged 847 hours in the FA-18 simulator, more time than many active pilots accumulated in a year. She'd practiced every emergency scenario in the training database: engine failures at altitude, hydraulic system crashes, navigation equipment malfunctions, and weather-related challenges that would test even veteran aviators. But Selena's education went beyond simple flight time. She developed an almost supernatural understanding of how stress affected aircraft systems. During her day job, she'd noticed patterns that escaped others: how certain pilots' aggressive flying styles created microscopic metal fatigue in specific components, how environmental factors influenced engine performance in ways that weren't documented in official manuals, how the personality of individual aircraft manifested through subtle variations in system behavior. The maintenance prodigy petty officer second class Marcus Thompson had worked aircraft maintenance for 8 years before being assigned to Selena's crew. A broad-shouldered man from rural Alabama who'd initially resented being supervised by someone half his age, he'd quickly learned to respect her extraordinary diagnostic abilities. "Rodriguez sees things," he'd tell new arrivals to their maintenance team, "things that don't show up on computers or in regulation manuals." She'd run her hand along a wing surface and tell you there's stress developing in a specific rivet that won't show problems for another 50 flight hours. And she's always right. Selena's maintenance record supported Thompson's claims. In 18 months at Coronado, she'd prevented 4 potential in-flight emergencies by identifying problems that traditional diagnostic equipment had missed. Her aircraft consistently performed better, lasted longer, and required fewer emergency repairs than those maintained by other crews. The pilots noticed the difference, even if they didn't understand its source. Aircraft coming out of Selena's bay responded more crisply to control inputs, maintained stable performance under stress, and seemed to handle emergency situations with unusual resilience. But instead of crediting her expertise, they attributed the improved performance to luck or newer equipment, the invisible barrier. Despite her technical mastery and extensive simulation experience, Selena faced an invisible but impenetrable barrier within the naval aviation community. The path from maintenance to pilot required recommendations from commanding officers, and those recommendations traditionally went to personnel who fit a specific profile, usually male, usually from military families with connections, usually possessing the kind of aggressive confidence that played well in officer evaluation boards. Selena's quiet competence worked against her in a culture that valued visible leadership over technical expertise. When she suggested modifications to maintenance procedures that could improve safety margins, her ideas were often credited to male supervisors who presented them to higher command. When she identified design flaws that could compromise mission effectiveness, her reports disappeared into bureaucratic channels without acknowledgement. The most frustrating aspect wasn't the lack of recognition, it was watching less qualified personnel advance while she remained invisible. Lieutenant Brad Morrison, a pilot whose cavalier attitude toward pre-flight checks had created multiple maintenance headaches, had recently been selected for advanced tactical training. Meanwhile, Selena's requests for additional technical education were consistently denied due to budget constraints and mission priorities. The gathering storm on this particular February morning, as Selena completed her pre-dawn inspection of the Iron Eagle's aircraft, she noticed something that would have escaped most maintenance personnel. Aircraft 47 Charlie, Commander Stevens' personal bird, showed microscopic stress patterns around the primary hydraulic connections that suggested recent hard maneuvering had pushed the system close to its tolerance limits. The damage wasn't immediately dangerous, but it represented the kind of cumulative stress that could lead to catastrophic failure under extreme conditions. Selina made a note to recommend additional inspection protocols, knowing that Stevens would likely dismiss her concerns as overcautious maintenance. Paranoia. As the morning sun painted the Pacific horizon in shades of gold and crimson, Selina Rodriguez finished her inspection routine and prepared for another day of being professionally invisible. She had no way of knowing that within 72 hours, the expertise everyone dismissed would become the only thing standing between 24 elite pilots and a watery grave in hostile waters. The Iron Eagles would soon discover that the quiet young woman they'd overlooked possessed skills that no amount of flight training could teach: the ability to understand aircraft not just as machines, but as living entities with their own personalities, limitations, and hidden strengths. And when conventional solutions failed and desperate situations demanded impossible choices, Selina Rodriguez would prove that sometimes the most qualified person for an extraordinary mission is the one nobody expects to volunteer, preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The corridors of Building 14 echoed with Selina's footsteps as she made her way through the deserted facility. The Flight Simulation Center officially closed 3 hours ago, but Master Chief Williams had discreetly provided her with an access card that worked during off hours. What started as innocent curiosity had evolved into something approaching obsession, a nightly ritual that fed a hunger she couldn't quite name. The FSA-18 simulator hummed to life under her practiced touch, its multiple screens casting an ethereal blue glow across her concentrated features. Tonight's challenge, a scenario she'd created herself by combining elements from 3 different training modules. Engine failure during a storm over hostile waters with a damaged navigation. System and limited fuel. Most pilots would consider such a scenario a nightmare. For Selina, it was Tuesday evening entertainment. Selina's approach to simulation training differed fundamentally from traditional pilot education. Where standard training focused on memorizing responses to specific scenarios, she studied the underlying principles that governed aircraft behavior under stress. She'd spent months analyzing how different combinations of system failures created cascading problems, learning to read the subtle cues that preceded catastrophic events. Her father's notebooks provided the theoretical foundation, but Selina had built upon that knowledge with systematic experimentation. She documented how engine temperature variations affected fuel efficiency under different atmospheric conditions. She'd mapped the relationship between aircraft weight distribution and control responsiveness during emergency maneuvers. She'd even developed her own emergency procedures that improved upon standard Navy protocols. Tonight's simulation presented a particularly vicious challenge, leading a formation of damaged aircraft through a severe storm while evading hostile radar coverage. The scenario required split-second decision-making, advanced formation flying techniques, and an intuitive understanding of how weather patterns affected multiple aircraft simultaneously. As Selina navigated through digital storm clouds, her mind processed information with mechanical precision. Airspeed, 340 knots. Altitude, 15,000 feet and descending. Fuel remaining, 18 minutes. Weather radar showing severe turbulence ahead with embedded thunderstorms, creating a nearly impenetrable wall of atmospheric violence. The simulation threw everything at her. Wind, shear that threatened to flip the aircraft inverted. Lightning strikes that temporarily blinded her instruments. And radar contacts suggesting enemy fighters closing from multiple directions. Through it all, Selina maintained formation integrity while plotting a course that would bring all aircraft safely home. What made her performance extraordinary wasn't just her technical skill, it was her ability to think like 24 different pilots simultaneously. She'd studied the flying styles of every Iron Eagle's pilot, learning their individual strengths, weaknesses, and decision-making patterns. In her simulations, she didn't just fly one aircraft. She orchestrated entire squadrons, accounting for how each pilot would react under stress. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, the squadron's only female pilot, tended to overcorrect during high-stress situations. Commander Stevens made excellent tactical decisions but sometimes pushed his aircraft beyond safe operating limits. Captain Robert Hayes, the squadron's senior pilot, had exceptional formation flying skills but struggled with non-standard emergency procedures. Selena had mentally cataloged these traits through months of observing post-flight maintenance requirements. Aircraft revealed their pilot's secrets through wear patterns, system stress indicators, and the subtle signs of how they'd been handled during flight operations. Selena's education extended beyond solo simulation sessions. She'd cultivated relationships with personnel throughout the base who possessed specialized knowledge that official training programs didn't cover. These informal mentors had become crucial to her development as an aviation expert. Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Walsh, a civilian contractor with 20 years of experience predicting weather patterns over the Pacific, had taught Selena to read atmospheric conditions with almost supernatural accuracy. During coffee breaks, Walsh would explain how ocean temperatures influenced storm formation, how seasonal wind patterns created predictable turbulence zones, and how to identify weather windows that could make impossible missions merely difficult. Lieutenant Commander David Park, who managed the base's air traffic control operations, had shown Selena how to think like multiple aircraft simultaneously. During quiet evening shifts, he'd walk her through complex traffic management scenarios, teaching her to visualize three-dimensional airspace as a constantly shifting puzzle where every piece affected every other piece. Perhaps most importantly, Senior Chief Alex Rodriguez, no relation, despite the shared surname, had become her informal instructor in combat tactics. Rodriguez had served 3 tours as an enlisted flight engineer on Navy transport aircraft, accumulating experience in hostile environments that most pilots never encountered. He'd taught Selena about flying in contested airspace, electronic warfare countermeasures, and the psychological challenges of leading personnel through life-threatening situations, while other maintenance personnel used diagnostic equipment according to standard procedures. Selena had developed innovative techniques that revealed information hidden from conventional analysis. She'd learned to correlate engine performance data with pilot stress levels, identifying patterns that predicted equipment failures before they became critical. Her personal laptop contained databases she'd compiled from 18 months of maintenance. Records cross-referenced with weather conditions, pilot experience levels, and mission parameters. The patterns she'd discovered would have impressed data scientists at major corporations, insights that could revolutionize aircraft maintenance practices if anyone had bothered to examine her work. One particularly valuable discovery involved the relationship between atmospheric pressure changes and hydraulic system efficiency. Selena had noticed that certain pilots experienced control problems during weather transitions that couldn't be explained by standard maintenance protocols. Through systematic analysis, she'd identified how rapid pressure changes affected fluid dynamics in ways that standard testing didn't detect. This knowledge had already prevented 2 potential accidents. Aircraft returning from flights through rapidly changing weather conditions now received additional hydraulic system inspections based on Selena's recommendations, though the official maintenance protocols still credited the discoveries to her male supervisors. Selena's most controversial training technique involved deliberately creating emergency scenarios that pushed aircraft systems beyond their documented limits. Using advanced simulation software, she'd program situations that combined multiple system failures in ways that official training protocols considered too dangerous to practice. These extreme scenarios had taught her to find solutions in impossible situations. When all primary systems failed, she'd learned to fly using backup instruments that most pilots barely understood. When multiple engines shut down simultaneously, she developed gliding techniques that could extend range far beyond official Calculations. When navigation systems died completely, she'd mastered the nearly lost art of celestial navigation, using nothing but analog instruments and mathematical calculations at asterisk. The knowledge came with risks. Some of her techniques violated standard operating procedures, requiring judgment calls that could end careers if they went wrong. But Selena had studied enough accident reports to understand that survival sometimes demanded breaking rules that were written for normal circumstances. As she completed tonight's simulation, successfully bringing 12 damaged aircraft through the storm with 0 casualties, Selena powered down the system and prepared to return to her quarters. The digital displays faded to black, leaving her alone with the quiet satisfaction of another mission accomplished. Tomorrow would bring another day of being professionally invisible, another shift of maintaining aircraft for pilots who saw her as background personnel. But in the darkness of Building 14, surrounded by the sophisticated technology that had become her second home, Selena Rodriguez possessed capabilities that transcended official rank structures and traditional career paths. She'd spent 1,200 hours preparing for missions that didn't exist, developing skills that weren't recognized, and mastering challenges that most people couldn't imagine. The naval aviation community had no idea what they'd created through their systematic dismissal of her potential. In 72 hours, when conventional solutions proved inadequate and desperate situations demanded extraordinary expertise, they would discover that the quiet maintenance specialist they'd overlooked had become something unprecedented. A pilot without wings who could fly better than anyone with them. The Iron Eagles were about to learn that expertise couldn't be faked, that real competence developed in darkness and silence, and that sometimes the most qualified person for an impossible mission was the one nobody expected to be ready. Selena Rodriguez was ready. She'd been ready for months. The only question remaining was whether the Navy was ready for her. The klaxon's piercing wail shattered the peaceful Tuesday night calm across Coronado Naval Air Station like a freight train through silence. Red emergency. Lights bathed the base in an ominous glow as personnel scrambled from their quarters, pulling on flight suits and racing toward predetermined stations. For Selena Rodriguez, who had been reviewing technical manuals in her small barracks room, the sound triggered an adrenaline surge that made her hands shake as she reached for her maintenance toolkit. Emergency protocols at Coronado weren't activated. Lightly, the last time these alarms had sounded was during Hurricane Patricia 2 years ago, when the base had battled 90-mile-per-hour winds to secure aircraft worth over $2 billion. Tonight felt different, more urgent, more desperate. Inside the Emergency Command Center, Admiral Rebecca Morrison stood before a wall of monitors displaying satellite imagery, weather patterns, and real-time communication feeds from across the Pacific Theater. Her weathered face, marked by 3 decades of naval service, showed the kind of controlled tension that preceded impossible decisions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the chaos of arriving personnel. "At 2,130 hours, our intelligence networks intercepted communications indicating that USS Valiant, operating in international waters near the Spratly Islands, has suffered catastrophic damage from what appears to be a coordinated attack by unidentified aircraft." The room fell silent except for the hum of electronic equipment. USS Valiant was a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, one of the most powerful warships ever constructed, home to over 5,000 personnel and equipped with defensive systems that made it virtually unsinkable under normal circumstances. Admiral Morrison continued, her voice steady despite delivering news that chilled everyone present. "Valiant's flight deck has been severely damaged. Their catapult systems are non-operational, and their arresting gear has been destroyed. More critically, a fire in their avgas storage compartments has created toxic atmospheric conditions that make normal flight operations impossible." Captain Rebecca Hayes, the base operations commander, stepped forward with a tactical display, showing the carrier's position. Ma'am, what's the status of Valiant's air wing? 24 FA-18 Super Hornets from the Iron Eagles. Squadron were conducting routine patrol operations when the attack occurred, Morrison replied grimly. They're currently airborne with approximately 90 minutes of fuel remaining. Valiant cannot recover them due to the flight deck damage, and there are no suitable diversion airfields within their fuel range. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. 24 of the Navy's most advanced fighter aircraft, crewed by some of America's finest pilots, were effectively stranded in hostile waters with nowhere to land. Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Colonel Susan Park activated a three-dimensional holographic display showing the Western Pacific region. The tactical situation looked like a chess game designed by a sadist, every possible solution blocked by insurmountable obstacles. The Iron Eagles are currently here. Park indicated a point roughly 200 miles southeast of the Spratly Islands, flying defensive patterns while awaiting instructions. Weather reconnaissance shows a Category 4 typhoon approaching from the east, with sustained winds exceeding 150 miles per hour and embedded supercells containing severe turbulence. Commander Jake Stevens' voice crackled through the communication system from his aircraft. Corona to control. This is Iron Eagle Leader. We need immediate guidance on diversion options. My birds are burning fuel fast, and we're seeing hostile radar contacts maintaining distance, but definitely tracking our position. Admiral Morrison studied the tactical display with the expression of someone calculating impossible mathematics. The nearest friendly airfield was Clark Air Base in the Fay Air Base in the Fayette, Philippines, to 340 miles away through airspace that intelligence reports suggested was now contested. The Iron Eagle's fuel situation made that distance academic. They'd run dry approximately 50 miles short of reaching safety. Captain Hayes coordinated with flight operations to explore every conceivable solution. Ma'am, we've contacted every Allied naval vessel within 500 miles. The closest carrier with operational flight capabilities is USS Enterprise, currently 420 miles northwest and steaming toward the area at maximum speed. Even if they could achieve 35 knots, they won't reach interception range for another 8 hours. The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. The Iron Eagles had 90 minutes of fuel. Enterprise needed 8 hours to reach them. Amount of military precision could compress time or create fuel from nothing. What about aerial refueling? Suggested Commander Patricia Walsh from the Logistics Division. Negative, replied Major David Chun from Tactical Planning. Our nearest KC-135 tankers are based at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam. They're already airborne but won't reach the operational area for another 4 hours. Even if they could make contact, the weather conditions are deteriorating too rapidly for safe refueling operations. Lieutenant Commander Robert Kim, the base's senior meteorologist, provided the final piece of devastating news. The typhoon's forward edge will reach the Iron Eagle's position in approximately 2 hours. Wind speeds in that area will exceed 120 miles per hour, with cloud tops reaching 60,000 feet and severe turbulence extending from sea level to 40,000 feet. No aircraft can safely operate in those conditions. Through the static-filled communications, individual voices from the Iron Eagle Squadron began filtering into the command center. These weren't just tactical calsigns on a radar screen. They were people with families, dreams, and futures that hung in the balance of decisions being made by personnel who felt the weight of impossible responsibility. Coronado Control. This is Iron Eagle 7, came the voice of Lieutenant Sarah Chun, her normally confident tone betraying underlying tension. We're experiencing some engine roughness up here. Request permission to reduce power settings to conserve fuel. Captain Robert Hayes, the squadron's senior pilot, transmitted next. Control, we've been discussing formation optimization to maximize fuel efficiency. We can reduce our burn rate by approximately 8% through tight formation flying. But that might only buy us an additional 12 minutes. The most heartbreaking transmission came from Lieutenant Brad Morrison, whose aircraft was experiencing minor electrical problems. Control. I want it on record that flying with the Iron Eagles has been the honor of my career. If we don't make it home tonight, please tell my wife Jennifer that our baby will grow up knowing their father died, serving something bigger than himself. Admiral Morrison's jaw tightened as she listened to her pilots, preparing for the possibility of death with the same professional calm they'd used to discuss weather conditions. These men and women represented years of training, millions of dollars in education, and irreplaceable experience in naval aviation. More importantly, they were human beings who deserved every possible effort to bring them home alive. Asterisk, the base's advanced tactical computer system had been silently analyzing all available data, fuel consumption rates, weather patterns, aircraft capabilities, pilot experience levels, and every conceivable combination of resources that might create a solution. When the system finally generated its recommendation, the result appeared on Admiral Morrison's personal display screen in clinical, emotionless text, tactical assessment, nitrogen monoxide viable solution, identified probability of mission success, 0.00%, recommended action, prepare for total squadron loss. The algorithm had considered every conventional option and found them all inadequate. Mathematics didn't lie, and the mathematics of this situation led to an unavoidable conclusion. 24 pilots would die tonight unless someone could devise a solution that transcended the normal boundaries of possibility. That's when Captain Hayes made a desperate suggestion that would change everything. "Ma'am, what if we sent someone to guide them home? A lead aircraft that could navigate through the storm and show them a route that might give them a fighting chance?" "With what aircraft?" Admiral Morrison asked sharply. "We don't have anything on base with the range to reach them and return safely. We have the XF-18G experimental variant in Hangar 12, Hayes replied slowly. It's equipped with extended fuel tanks and enhanced navigation systems for long-range reconnaissance missions. The range would be marginal, but theoretically possible. The experimental aircraft represented the cutting edge of naval aviation technology, a heavily modified Super Hornet designed to push the boundaries of what single-seat fighters could accomplish. It had never been flown in combat conditions, and its test pilots had all been veteran aviators with thousands of hours of experience. Admiral Morrison studied the faces around her, experienced officers who had devoted their careers to solving impossible problems. Tonight, conventional wisdom and traditional solutions had failed completely. What remained was a choice between accepting the unacceptable or attempting something that had never been tried. Who would fly it? She asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. Every qualified pilot on the base was either already committed to other duties or lacked the specific combination of skills needed for such an unprecedented mission. They needed someone who could navigate by instinct through a Category 4 typhoon, led 24 aircraft through hostile airspace, and possessed the technical knowledge to troubleshoot problems that no training manual had ever anticipated. In the silence that followed, a quiet voice from the back of the room would soon change the course of naval aviation history forever. In the suffocating silence that followed Admiral Morrison's question, the weight of impossible mathematics pressed down on everyone in the room like a physical force. 24 pilots circling in hostile waters, 90 minutes of fuel, a Category 4 typhoon bearing down with the fury of nature unleashed. And somewhere in this room of experienced officers and seasoned aviators, someone had to volunteer for a mission that defied every principle of rational decision-making. From her position near the back wall, Selena Rodriguez had absorbed every detail of the crisis unfolding before her. She'd been summoned to the emergency command center to provide technical expertise about aircraft capabilities under extreme conditions, a consultation role that made her invisible to the decision-makers. Wrestling with command responsibilities, but invisibility had its advantages. While senior officers debated tactical options and calculated fuel consumption rates, Selena had been running her own mental simulations based on information they didn't possess. "I'll fly it." The words emerged from Selena's throat with quiet certainty that cut through the command center's tension like a surgical blade. Heads turned toward her with expressions ranging from confusion to outright incredulity. Several officers appeared to have forgotten she was even present. Admiral Morrison's eyebrows rose as she focused on the young woman who had just volunteered for what amounted to aerial suicide. "I'm sorry, Petty Officer Rodriguez, but this isn't a maintenance issue. We need a qualified pilot for what may be the most challenging flight mission in naval aviation history." "Ma'am," Selena replied, stepping forward with the kind of calm confidence that made people reconsider their assumptions. "I am qualified. More qualified than anyone else in this room for this specific mission." Commander Jake Stevens, monitoring the situation from his cockpit 200 miles away, transmitted with barely concealed irritation. "Control, please tell me we're not seriously considering sending maintenance personnel on a combat rescue mission. My pilots need professional leadership, not good intentions." The dismissal stung, but Selena had expected it. She'd spent 2 years being underestimated by people who confused rank with competence, who assumed that quiet professionalism indicated limited capability. Tonight, those assumptions would be tested against the unforgiving mathematics of life and death. Captain Hayes activated a personnel database terminal and pulled up Selena's complete military record. What appeared on the screen made several officers lean forward with renewed interest. "Petty Officer Rodriguez," Hayes read aloud, "graduated first in her class from Naval Technical Training Command with perfect scores in aircraft systems, avionics, and emergency procedures. Certified on FA-18 Super Hornet maintenance, with specialty qualifications in advanced diagnostics and combat damage assessment." Admiral Morrison studied the display with growing fascination. "Those are impressive technical credentials, but flying an aircraft in combat conditions requires different skills entirely." Selena opened the tablet she'd been carrying and displayed a series of detailed flight logs that made the room fall silent. "Ma'am, I've logged 1,847 hours in FA-18 simulators over the past 18 months. That includes 342 hours of adverse weather flying, 156 hours of formation leadership scenarios, and 89 hours specifically practicing emergency navigation through severe storm conditions." The numbers themselves were staggering, but what made them extraordinary was their focus. While most pilots accumulated flight time across diverse scenarios, Selena had systematically prepared for exactly the type of mission now facing them. Master Chief Williams stepped forward, her gruff voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in naval aviation. "Admiral, I've been monitoring Rodriguez's simulation training. Her performance metrics exceed those of pilots with 10 times her official flight experience. She's not just qualified, she's been preparing for this exact scenario without knowing it." Lieutenant Commander David Park from Air Traffic Control added crucial context that shifted the room's perspective. "Ma'am, this mission isn't just about flying skills. Whoever takes that experimental aircraft will need to coordinate 24 separate aircraft through a typhoon while managing fuel consumption rates for pilots with varying experience levels. It's as much air traffic control as it is piloting." Selena seized the opportunity to demonstrate knowledge that transcended simple flight training. "Admiral, I've studied the flight characteristics of every pilot in the Iron Eagle Squadron. Lieutenant Chun tends to overcorrect in turbulence, which increases her fuel consumption by approximately 12%. Captain Hayes has exceptional formation discipline but needs clear instructions during non-standard maneuvers. Commander Stevens makes excellent tactical decisions, but sometimes pushes his aircraft beyond optimal efficiency parameters. The specificity of her observations stunned the senior officers. This wasn't theoretical knowledge from training manuals. This was practical intelligence gathered through months of careful observation and analysis. How could you possibly know such detailed information about pilot behavior? Admiral Morrison asked, her tone shifting from skepticism to genuine curiosity. Because I maintain their aircraft, ma'am, Selina replied simply. Every flight creates wear patterns, stress indicators, and system variations that reveal how an aircraft has been handled. Lieutenant Morrison's tendency to use excessive control inputs shows up as hydraulic pressure fluctuations. Captain Hayes' smooth flying style leaves minimal stress signatures. I've been correlating maintenance data with pilot performance for 2 years. Chief Meteorologist Jennifer Walsh, who had been quietly reviewing weather data, suddenly looked up with an expression of recognition. Admiral, Rodriguez isn't just qualified for this mission. She may be the only person who can succeed. 3 weeks ago, she asked me to provide weather data for a simulation scenario that matches tonight's conditions almost exactly. The revelation sent a murmur through the command center. Selina had been practicing for this specific combination of challenges weeks before anyone knew such a mission might become necessary. It was a theoretical exercise, Selina explained, feeling suddenly exposed under the intense scrutiny. I'd been studying typhoon formation patterns and wanted to understand how severe weather affected large formation flying. The scenario combined adverse weather, fuel limitations, and navigation challenges similar to what we're facing tonight. Admiral Morrison leaned forward, her command authority focusing on this unexpected possibility. What was the outcome of your simulation? Mission success with 0 casualties, Selina replied without hesitation. But it required unconventional navigation techniques and formation procedures that aren't covered in standard training protocols. The statement hung in the air like a challenge to everything conventional wisdom suggested about naval aviation. Here was a maintenance specialist claiming she could succeed where experienced combat pilots might fail, using methods that didn't appear in official manuals. From his aircraft circling above increasingly hostile waters, Commander Stevens transmitted again, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility for 23 other lives. Control, we're down to 75 minutes of fuel. Whatever we're going to do, we need to decide now. My people are starting to show stress indicators, and the weather is deteriorating faster than predicted. The urgency in Stevens' transmission crystallized the moment into stark reality. This wasn't a theoretical discussion about qualifications or proper procedures. This was a life-and-death decision that had to be made with incomplete information and imperfect options. Admiral Morrison stood silently for 30 seconds that felt like 30 minutes, weighing factors that no command school had prepared her to balance. On one side, 24 experienced pilots flying proven aircraft in a desperate situation. On the other, an untested maintenance specialist, proposing to lead them home using experimental equipment and unconventional methods. Rodriguez, the Admiral said finally, her voice carrying the weight of command authority, if I authorize this mission, you understand that you'll be responsible for 24 lives and conditions that have killed experienced pilots with thousands of hours of flight time. Selina met the Admiral's gaze with steady determination. Ma'am, I understand the responsibility. But with respect, those pilots are going to die anyway unless someone tries something different. I've been preparing for exactly this situation for 18 months. I know I can bring them home. The confidence in her voice wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet certainty of someone who had done the work, studied the problems, and developed solutions that others hadn't considered. Admiral Morrison looked around the command center at the faces of officers who had initially dismissed Selina's capabilities. The mathematics of the situation remained unchanged. Conventional solutions had failed. Time was running out, and desperate circumstances demanded extraordinary measures. "Captain Hayes," she ordered, "prepare the XF-18G for immediate launch. Rodriguez, you have authorization for this mission, but I want it understood that you're flying experimental equipment into conditions that no aircraft has ever successfully navigated." The command center erupted into coordinated activity as personnel scrambled to prepare for a mission that defied every principle of conservative military planning. But in the chaos of preparation, one voice cut through the noise with crystal clarity. "Admiral," Selena said quietly, "there's one more thing. The Iron Eagle's pilots don't know me, and they're not going to want to follow orders from someone they see as maintenance personnel. Once I'm airborne, I'll need you to make it clear that my mission authority comes directly from you." "Admiral." Morrison nodded grimly. "Rodriguez, when you reach those pilots, you won't just be representing yourself. You'll be carrying the full authority of the United States Navy. Bring our people home." As Selena turned toward the door, her mind was already shifting into mission mode, calculating fuel loads, weather patterns, and navigation routes that would either vindicate years of preparation or become the final chapter in 25 stories. That deserved better endings. The XF-18G, experimental Super Hornet, sat under the harsh fluorescent lights of Hangar 12 like a predator waiting to be unleashed. Unlike the standard FA-18s that Selena knew intimately, this aircraft represented the bleeding edge of naval aviation. Technology, a one-off prototype, designed to push the boundaries of what single-seat fighters could accomplish. Its most obvious modification was the enlarged fuel tank configuration that gave it nearly double the range of standard Super Hornets. But the real innovations lay in its advanced avionics suite, experimental weather radar, capable of mapping storm systems in 3 dimensions, enhanced navigation computers that could process multiple data streams simultaneously, and communication systems designed to coordinate complex, multi-aircraft operations. Selena approached the aircraft with the same methodical precision she'd used for routine maintenance inspections. But tonight every system check carried life-or-death implications. This wasn't just pre-flight preparation, it was the final exam for 18 months of secret education in naval aviation. Master Chief Williams appeared beside her, with a clipboard containing the aircraft's technical specifications. "Rodriguez, this bird's got systems you've never worked on. The experimental avionics package uses different protocols. The fuel management system requires manual calculations that aren't in any maintenance manual. And the weather radar interface is so new that even the test pilots are still learning how to use it properly." Selena studied the specifications with focused intensity, her mind automatically correlating new information with principles she'd learned from her father's notebooks and months of simulator training. "Chief, the underlying aerodynamics are identical to standard Super Hornets. The advanced systems are additions, not replacements. I can fly this." "Flying it isn't the question," Williams replied grimly. "The question is whether you can master systems you've never seen while navigating through a Category 4 Typhoon and coordinating 24 other aircraft. That's asking someone to become an expert in 3 different specialties simultaneously." As Selena climbed into the cockpit, she felt the weight of the experimental aircraft's complexity settling around her like a technological cocoon. The instrument panel contained twice as many displays as standard fighters, with readouts showing atmospheric conditions, fuel consumption projections for multiple aircraft, and real-time weather mapping that looked like something from a science fiction movie. But beneath the advanced technology, she recognized the fundamental architecture of aircraft she'd maintained for 2 years. The primary flight controls responded with familiar precision. The engine startup sequence followed logical patterns she'd memorized. The basic navigation systems operated on principles she'd studied until they became second nature. In the command center, Admiral Morrison watched weather updates that painted an increasingly grim picture of conditions over the Western Pacific. The typhoon was intensifying faster than predicted. with wind speeds approaching 180 miles per hour and storm cells reaching unprecedented altitudes. "Ma'am," reported Chief Meteorologist Walsh, "the window for launching any rescue mission is closing rapidly. In 30 minutes, surface winds at Coronado will exceed safe takeoff limits. If Rodriguez doesn't launch within the next quarter hour, we won't be able to get her airborne at all." The Admiral activated her communication link to Hangar 12. "Rodriguez, what's your status? We're running out of time on multiple fronts." Selena's voice came back steady and professional. "Admiral, I'm completing final systems checks now. The experimental avionics are more complex than standard aircraft, but the principles are similar to simulators I've trained on. I'll be ready for launch in 8 minutes. 8 minutes to master technology that test pilots had spent months learning to operate safely. 8 minutes to prepare for a mission that experienced combat aviators considered impossible. 8 minutes to validate or destroy. 2 years of preparation for a moment that no one had expected to arrive. As the XF-18G taxied toward the runway, Selena established radio contact with the Iron Eagle Squadron. The response from Commander Stevens carried undertones of disbelief and professional concern that bordered on insubordination. "Control, this is Iron Eagle Leader. Please confirm the identity of our rescue coordinator. The voice profile doesn't match any pilot in our squadron database." Admiral Morrison's response cut through the radio frequencies with unmistakable command authority. "Iron Eagle Leader, this is Admiral Morrison speaking directly. Petty Officer Rodriguez is flying under my personal authorization with full mission. Command authority. You will follow her instructions precisely and without question. Is that understood?" The silence that followed lasted 10 seconds before Stevens responded with barely concealed frustration. "Control. Understood. But ma'am, my pilots deserve to know what qualifications authorize a maintenance specialist to lead us through the most dangerous flight conditions any of us have ever encountered." Selena keyed her radio, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. "Iron Eagle Leader, this is Ghost One. I have 1,847 hours of A-18 simulator time, specializing in adverse weather operations and formation leadership. I've studied the flight characteristics of every pilot in your squadron through maintenance analysis. I know your aircraft better than you do, and I've been preparing for exactly this scenario for 18 months. The honesty of her response created another moment of radio silence before Lieutenant Sarah Chun transmitted. "Ghost One, this is Iron Eagle 7. We're running out of options up here, and the weather is getting worse by the minute. If you can, get us home safely. I don't care if you learn to fly by reading comic books." The XF-18G lifted off from Coronado at 12:31 a.m., its experimental engines providing thrust that pressed Selena back into the pilot's seat with familiar force. But as she climbed through 10,000 feet and turned northwest toward the Iron Eagle's position, she entered atmospheric conditions, unlike anything her simulator training had prepared her for. The typhoon's outer bands created turbulence that felt like flying inside a washing machine operated by a vindictive giant. The experimental aircraft's advanced stabilization systems worked overtime to maintain level flight as wind shear tried to flip the fighter inverted. Rain struck the canopy with the force of artillery, reducing visibility to mere yards despite the sophisticated weather radar. Selena activated the experimental navigation system and began plotting an intercept course that would bring her to the Iron Eagle's position with minimal fuel expenditure. The advanced computers provided real-time calculations showing wind patterns, atmospheric pressure variations, and optimal flight paths through the storm system. But the most challenging aspect wasn't flying through the typhoon. It was preparing to assume leadership of 24 experienced pilots who had no reason to trust her judgment and every reason to question her authority. As she penetrated deeper into the storm system, Selena's experimental weather radar revealed the true scope. of the challenge ahead. The Typhoon had developed a structure that meteorologists would later describe as unprecedented. Multiple eye walls creating concentric circles of devastating wind speeds, with embedded supercells that generated tornadoes at flight altitude. Iron Eagles were trapped in a pocket of relatively calm air between the storm's inner and outer eye walls, but that pocket was shrinking as the Typhoon continued to intensify. Any attempt to fly directly through the storm walls would subject aircraft to wind speeds that could literally tear them apart. Selena began calculating alternative routes that used the storm's own energy to assist rather than oppose their flight. Path. The technique required understanding atmospheric dynamics at a level that few pilots ever achieved, treating the Typhoon not as an obstacle to overcome, but as a natural phenomenon to navigate using its own internal logic, her father's. Notebooks had contained theoretical discussions of storm flying that most aviators considered too dangerous to attempt. But theory was about to become survival reality for 25 aircraft carrying people who wanted to see their families again. The experimental aircraft's extended range gave Selena enough fuel to reach the Iron Eagles and return to Coronado. But the calculations assumed normal flight conditions. Flying through a Category 4 Typhoon would increase fuel consumption significantly, creating margins so thin that even small miscalculations could prove fatal. More critically, the Iron Eagles themselves were approaching fuel states that left no room for error. Each minute of delay, each course correction, each deviation from optimal flight paths consumed precious fuel that couldn't be replaced. The mission required perfect execution from 25 different pilots flying in conditions that made perfect execution nearly impossible. As she approached the coordinates where the Iron Eagles waited, Selena transmitted on their squadron frequency. Iron Eagle Flight. This is Ghost 1 approaching your position from bearing 090. I'm going to need everyone to follow my instructions exactly as given. We're going to fly through this storm using techniques that aren't in any manual, but they're techniques that will get us home alive. Commander Stevens responded with the kind of professional skepticism that experienced pilots develop when facing situations that challenge everything they've been taught. Ghost 1. What you're proposing sounds like we're going to attempt experimental procedures in lethal weather conditions. Are you certain these techniques have been tested? Selena's response carried the quiet confidence of someone who had done the work when no one was watching. Iron Eagle Leader. I've tested these procedures in simulation hundreds of times. Tonight, we find out if preparation can overcome impossible odds. Ahead, through the chaos of wind and rain and lightning that could blind pilots and disable aircraft, 24 of the Navy's finest aviators waited for a maintenance specialist to guide them through the most dangerous flight of their careers. The storm didn't care about rank, experience, or official qualifications. It only cared about skill, preparation, and the kind of determination that refused to accept defeat when lives hung in the balance. Selena Rodriguez was about to discover whether 2 years of secret education could transform an invisible maintenance specialist into the leader that 24 pilots desperately needed. Through the chaos of wind and rain that turned the night sky into a liquid nightmare, Selena spotted the formation lights of the Iron Eagle Squadron, 24 FA-18 Super Hornets, maintaining defensive positions in a pocket of relatively stable air that was shrinking by the minute. The sight of those aircraft, each representing years of training and millions of dollars in technology, drove home the magnitude of responsibility now resting on her shoulders. Iron Eagle Flight. This is Ghost 1 on station, Selena transmitted, her voice steady despite flying through turbulence that would have terrified most pilots. I have visual contact with your formation. Beginning coordination procedures now. Commander. Stevens' response carried the weight of a man who had led combat missions over 3 continents, but had never faced a situation like this. Ghost 1. We're holding position as ordered, but fuel states are becoming critical. Iron Eagle 3 is down to 42 minutes remaining. and several other aircraft are showing similar numbers. The fuel situation was worse than Selena had anticipated. The Iron Eagles had been burning extra fuel fighting the storm's outer bands, consuming their already limited reserves faster than planned. Every minute of delay now moved them closer to the point where fuel would become more dangerous than the typhoon itself. Selena activated the XF-18G's experimental coordination system, which displayed the relative positions, fuel states, and aircraft condition of all 24 Iron Eagles fighters on a three-dimensional tactical display. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The squadron was scattered across nearly 5 miles of airspace, with individual aircraft fighting their own battles against wind shear and turbulence. Standard formation. Flying required aircraft to maintain precise positions relative to each other, but the typhoon's chaotic air currents made traditional formations impossible. Aircraft were being thrown hundreds of feet off course by wind gusts that changed direction and intensity without warning. Several pilots were using excessive control inputs to maintain position, burning fuel at rates that would leave them dry. Before reaching safety, Iron Eagle flight. "This is Ghost One," Selena transmitted, switching to her most authoritative command voice. "We're going to execute a formation change that will reduce your fuel consumption and improve our survivability. In these conditions, I need everyone to acknowledge that you're prepared to follow instructions that may seem unconventional." Lieutenant Brad Morrison, flying Iron Eagle 12, transmitted with barely concealed anxiety. "Ghost One, our training emphasizes tight formation integrity. Are you suggesting we abandon standard procedures?" Selena had anticipated this resistance. Naval aviators were trained to follow proven procedures, because deviating from established protocols often led to catastrophic results. But tonight, standard procedures were inadequate for conditions that exceeded normal operational parameters. "Iron Eagle 12. We're going to use adaptive formation techniques that allow each aircraft to find its own optimal position relative to atmospheric conditions while maintaining overall group cohesion. Think of it as flying with the storm instead of fighting against it." What Selena proposed next would later be studied in aviation academies as either brilliant innovation or dangerous improvisation, depending on the outcome. Instead of maintaining rigid geometric formations, she instructed the Iron Eagles to arrange themselves in a flowing, organic pattern that accommodated the typhoon's unpredictable air currents. "Iron Eagle flight. I want you to imagine the formation as a school of fish moving through turbulent water," she explained over the radio. "Each aircraft maintains awareness of its neighbors while adjusting its position to find the smoothest air available. The formation shape will constantly change, but group integrity remains intact." Captain Robert Hayes, the squadron senior pilot, transmitted with professional curiosity. "Ghost One, this technique isn't covered in any manual I've studied. What's the theoretical basis for adaptive formation flying?" Selena drew upon months of studying bird flight patterns and fluid dynamics principles that her father had explored in his experimental notebooks. Iron Eagle 6. Birds have been using similar techniques for millions of years. By allowing individual elements to optimize their position within the group structure, the overall formation becomes more efficient and resilient. The concept required pilots to think differently about formation flying, shifting from rigid adherence to precise positions toward dynamic cooperation within flexible boundaries. It demanded higher levels of situational awareness and trust, but it also promised to reduce the fuel consumption that was slowly killing them. As the Iron Eagles began implementing the adaptive formation concept, Selena studied the typhoon's structure using the XF-18G's advanced weather radar. What she discovered changed everything about their escape route options. The storm's multiple eye walls created a complex three-dimensional maze of devastating winds and relative calm areas. Traditional navigation would attempt to fly around the storm system, but that route would require more fuel than any of the aircraft possessed. However, Selena identified a possible path that used the storm's own internal structure to provide assistance rather than resistance. Iron Eagle Flight. I'm uploading navigation data that shows a route through the typhoon rather than around it, she transmitted, sharing her analysis with the squadron's navigation systems. We're going to thread between the storm's eye walls, using naturally occurring wind patterns to actually increase our ground speed. Commander Stevens studied the route data with mounting concern. Ghost 1, you're proposing that we fly directly into the most dangerous parts of a Category 4 typhoon. Our aircraft aren't designed to handle those wind loads. Selena had spent weeks analyzing aircraft stress tolerances and storm dynamics for exactly this type of scenario. Iron Eagle Leader, our aircraft can handle the conditions if we use proper techniques. The key is working with the storm's energy instead of opposing it. We'll be flying fast and precise, but we'll be flying with natural forces that will actually help push us toward home. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, flying Iron Eagle 7, was the first to fully implement the adaptive formation techniques. Her aircraft, which had been burning fuel at 15% above normal rates while fighting to maintain rigid position, suddenly found stable air and reduced its consumption to nearly optimal levels. Ghost 1, this is Iron Eagle 7, Chun transmitted with amazement in her voice. I'm showing significant improvement in fuel efficiency and aircraft stability. How did you know this would work? The success of Chun's aircraft provided validation that encouraged other pilots to trust Selena's unconventional methods. One by one, the Iron Eagles began flowing into positions that worked with the storm rather than against it, their fuel consumption rates dropping toward sustainable levels. But the real test would come when they entered the typhoon's most dangerous regions, areas where wind speeds exceeded 150 miles per hour and turbulence could disintegrate aircraft that weren't handled with perfect precision. As the formation began its approach toward the storm's inner structure, individual personalities within the Iron Eagle squadron revealed themselves through radio transmissions. Lieutenant Morrison continued expressing anxiety about deviation from standard procedures. Captain Hayes asked technical questions that showed he was learning to trust Selena's expertise. Commander Stevens maintained professional skepticism while acknowledging that conventional options had already failed. Most significantly, the younger pilots began demonstrating confidence and leadership that transcended traditional military hierarchies. They were following Selena not because of her rank or official authority, but because her methods were working when everything else had failed. Ghost 1, this is Iron Eagle 15, transmitted Ensign Kevin Walsh, the youngest pilot in the squadron. I wanted you to know that my aircraft is performing better in these conditions than it has all night. Whatever you're doing, please keep doing it. The growing trust from pilots who had initially dismissed her as maintenance personnel provided Selena with confidence that would prove crucial during the challenges ahead. Leading 24 aircraft through a Category 4 typhoon required more than technical knowledge. It demanded the kind of leadership that inspired people to attempt impossible things. As they approached the typhoon's inner eye wall, Selena transmitted one final instruction that would commit the entire formation to a course of action from which there could be no retreat. Iron Eagle Flight, we're about to enter the most dangerous part of our journey. Once we begin this passage, there will be no turning back. The route requires precise timing and absolute trust in each other. She paused, looking at the storm wall ahead that rose like a mountain of pure violence into the night sky. I need each of you to acknowledge that you're ready to follow my navigation instructions exactly as given, even when those instructions seem to take us directly into danger. One by one, 24 pilots acknowledged their readiness to follow a maintenance specialist into conditions that no naval aviator had ever successfully navigated. They were about to discover whether preparation, innovation, and determination could overcome the most powerful forces that nature and human conflict could combine against them. Iron Eagle Flight, this is Ghost One, Selena transmitted as they approached the wall of wind and rain that would either deliver them home or claim them all. We're going in. Stay close, trust the techniques, and follow me home. The typhoon waited ahead like a test that would determine whether quiet competence could triumph over impossible odds. The transition from turbulent but manageable conditions to the typhoon's inner eye wall felt like flying into the mouth of a living beast. One moment, the Iron Eagle's formation was navigating through heavy rain and moderate wind shear. The next, they were engulfed in a wall of atmospheric violence that defied human comprehension. Wind speeds jumped from 80 miles per hour to over 160 in a matter of seconds. The XF-18G's experimental airframe groaned under forces that pushed its engineering tolerances to their absolute limits. Selena felt the aircraft bucking and rolling like a wild horse as she fought to maintain control while simultaneously coordinating 24 other fighters through the same hellish conditions. Iron Eagle Flight, this is Ghost One, she transmitted. Her voice strained but steady as she wrestled with control inputs that required every ounce of her strength. We're entering the primary wind wall now. Maintain adaptive formation protocols and follow my exact flight path. Do not attempt to correct for turbulence. Let your aircraft flow with the air currents. The advice went against every instinct that combat pilots developed through years of training. When aircraft encountered severe turbulence, standard procedure called for active correction to maintain stable flight. But Selena's storm-flying techniques required pilots to surrender some control to the natural forces around them, using the typhoon's own energy as a form of atmospheric assistance. Lieutenant Brad Morrison, flying Iron Eagle 12, was the first to encounter serious trouble. His tendency toward overcorrection in stressful situations, a trait Selena had identified through maintenance analysis, caused his aircraft to fight against the wind patterns instead of flowing with them. Ghost One, this is Iron Eagle 12. Morrison's voice carried pure panic as his Super Hornet was thrown into an uncontrolled roll by wind shear that caught him unprepared. I'm losing control. Aircraft is inverted and descending. Selena's response was immediate and authoritative. Drawing upon hundreds of hours of emergency simulation training, Iron Eagle 12, stop fighting the controls. Reduce power to 60%. Neutralize all control inputs and let the aircraft stabilize naturally. The wind will right you if you don't oppose it. Every pilot in the formation heard Morrison's crisis and Selena's unorthodox response. Traditional recovery procedures called for aggressive control inputs to regain level flight, but Selena was asking Morrison to essentially surrender control to the storm itself. Ghost One, that goes against everything I've been taught. Morrison replied, his aircraft continuing its dangerous descent toward the ocean surface. If I don't correct now, I'm going to crash. Iron Eagle 12, trust the technique, Selena commanded with the kind of authority that brooked no argument. You have 15 seconds to implement my instructions, or you'll be beyond recovery altitude. Stop fighting and let the storm help. The next 10 seconds felt like hours as Morrison's aircraft tumbled through the typhoon's chaotic air currents. Then, miraculously, the natural wind patterns caught his Super Hornet and gently rolled it back to level flight, exactly as Selena had predicted. Ghost One, Iron Eagle 12 is level and stable, Morrison transmitted, his voice filled with amazement and newfound respect. I don't understand how you knew that would work, but it just saved my life. As the formation penetrated deeper into the typhoon's core structure, Selena's experimental weather radar revealed the true complexity of their passage. The storm contained not just one eye wall, but 3 concentric rings of devastating winds, each rotating at different speeds and creating interference patterns that generated tornadoes at flight altitude. Threading between these rotating walls of destruction required navigation precision that exceeded anything in standard pilot training. Selena had to calculate wind vectors in 3 dimensions while accounting for the storm's movement, the formation's fuel consumption, and the individual performance characteristics of 24 different aircraft. Iron Eagle flight. We're approaching a convergence zone where 2 wind walls create a narrow corridor of stable air. She transmitted, sharing navigation data that showed a passage barely wide enough for their formation. We'll have approximately 90 seconds to transit this corridor before the wind patterns shift and close the gap. Captain Robert Hayes, studying the navigation data with growing appreciation for its complexity, transmitted with professional curiosity. Ghost 1. These calculations require real-time processing of multiple atmospheric variables. How are you generating this level of navigation precision under these conditions? Selena was manipulating the XF-18G's experimental systems in ways that even test pilots hadn't fully explored, combining weather radar data with fluid dynamics calculations that her father had theorized about in his notebooks. Iron Eagle 6. I'm using experimental techniques that treat the storm as a dynamic system rather than a static obstacle. The key is predicting how the patterns will change rather than just observing current conditions. As they entered the narrow corridor between wind walls, the Iron Eagle's formation faced its greatest test of cohesion and trust. The passage required each aircraft to maintain position within a space that allowed no margin for error. Too far left meant destruction by the inner eye wall. Too far right meant being caught by the outer wind barrier. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, flying Iron Eagle 7, found herself struggling to maintain position as wind shear tried to push her aircraft into the path of Iron Eagle 9. Ghost 1. I'm being forced out of the corridor. The wind is pushing me toward 9's position. Selena's response demonstrated the kind of 3-dimensional thinking that separated exceptional aviators from merely competent ones. Iron Eagle 7. Drop altitude by 500 feet and increase speed by 20 knots. There's a lower air current moving in the opposite direction that will counteract the lateral pressure you're experiencing. The instruction required Chun to descend into what appeared to be more turbulent air, while accelerating in conditions that seemed to demand reduced speed. But Selena's understanding of atmospheric dynamics had identified a hidden layer of stable air that would provide the assistance Chun needed. Iron Eagle 7. That's incredible. Chun transmitted as her aircraft found the stable air layer and smoothly resumed proper formation position. How did you know that air current existed? As they approached the typhoon's eye, the calm center on which the entire storm system rotated, Selena faced a navigation decision that would determine the mission's ultimate success or failure. Standard meteorology suggested that the eye would provide a respite from the storm's violence, but her analysis indicated something more complex: that the typhoon's eye was collapsing due to the storm's rapid intensification, creating a situation where the calm center was shrinking faster than their formation could traverse it. If they entered the eye expecting stable conditions, they would find themselves trapped in the most dangerous part of the storm when the eye wall collapsed around them. Iron Eagle flight. We're not going to enter the eye, Selena transmitted, making a decision that contradicted every pilot's instinct to seek shelter from the storm. The eye is unstable and collapsing. We're going to skirt the edge and use the rotational energy to slingshot toward home. Commander Stevens transmitted with renewed concern. Ghost 1. You're proposing that we intentionally remain in the most dangerous part of the storm, rather than seeking the calm conditions in the eye. That seems counterintuitive, Selena's response carried the weight of calculations that processed atmospheric data faster than human minds typically worked. Iron Eagle leader. The eye appears calm, but it's a trap. The eye wall is contracting at 15 miles per hour. If we enter now, we'll be caught inside when it collapses, and no aircraft can survive those forces. Instead, she proposed using the storm's rotational energy as a natural accelerator, flying along the eyewall's outer edge to gain ground speed that would push them toward Coronado faster than their engines alone could manage. What Selena executed next would later be analyzed by meteorologists and aviation experts as either the most brilliant storm flying technique ever developed or the most dangerous gamble in naval aviation history. She led the Iron Eagle's formation into a precise spiral that used the typhoon's rotational forces to accelerate their ground speed while simultaneously moving them toward safety. The maneuver required each pilot to surrender normal flight control, assumptions, and trust that atmospheric forces could be harnessed like technological systems. Aircraft that typically cruised at 400 miles per hour found themselves moving at over 500 miles per hour ground speed as the storm's own energy pushed them toward home. Iron Eagle flight. You should be seeing significant improvements in ground speed and fuel efficiency, Selena transmitted as the slingshot effect took hold. We're using the storm's power to help us rather than fighting against it. Lieutenant Morrison, whose earlier crisis had been resolved by trusting Selena's unconventional methods, transmitted with growing confidence. Ghost One, this is like nothing I've ever experienced. It feels like the storm is actually helping us fly faster. As they completed this slingshot maneuver and began emerging from the typhoon's most dangerous regions, the Iron Eagle's formation had been transformed from a collection of individual aircraft fighting for survival into a coordinated unit that moved through atmospheric chaos with unprecedented efficiency. More importantly, they had proven that innovation, preparation, and trust could overcome challenges that conventional wisdom considered impossible. A maintenance specialist who had never flown combat missions had successfully led 24 experienced pilots through conditions that would have destroyed traditional formations, but their greatest challenge still lay ahead, returning to Coronado with fuel states that had been pushed to their absolute limits. In aircraft that had been stressed beyond normal operational parameters, led by someone whose authority came not from rank, but from results. Iron Eagle flight, this is Ghost One, Selena transmitted as they left the typhoon's most violent regions. Behind, we're through the worst of it, but we're not home yet. Maintain formation integrity and prepare for the final approach to Coronado. We've proven that impossible missions are just missions that nobody has figured out how to complete yet. Behind them, the typhoon continued its devastating path across the Western Pacific, having been conquered not through superior force, but through understanding, preparation, and the kind of leadership that emerged when expertise mattered more than authority. As the Iron Eagle's formation emerged from the typhoon's outer bands into the relatively calm air of Southern California, Selena Rodriguez found herself facing a challenge that no amount of simulation training had prepared her for: returning to a world that would never see her the same way again. The maintenance specialist who had departed Coronado 90 minutes ago no longer existed. In her place sat a pilot who had achieved something that would be studied in military academies for decades to come, but the mission wasn't complete yet. 24 aircraft were approaching home with fuel states that bordered on critical, systems that had been stressed beyond normal limits, and pilots who had just experienced the most intense flight operations of their careers. Each landing would require precision that left no room for error. Coronado Control, this is Ghost One leading Iron Eagle flight, Selena transmitted as they established contact with home base. We have 25 aircraft inbound, all souls accounted for. Requesting priority landing clearance. The response from Admiral Morrison came immediately, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and amazement that echoed across the radio frequencies. Ghost One, this is Admiral Morrison speaking personally. Outstanding work bringing our people home. Coronado is prepared for immediate recovery operations. You have absolute priority for all runway approaches. As they began their approach to Coronado, Lieutenant Morrison transmitted information that sent a chill through the formation. Ghost 1, this is Iron Eagle 12. I'm showing 8 minutes of fuel remaining. Several other aircraft are reporting similar numbers. The mathematics were brutal. 8 minutes of fuel at normal consumption rates. But landing procedures required precise positioning, possible go-arounds for spacing, and reserve fuel for emergency situations. Several aircraft were operating with margins so thin that even minor delays could result in engines flaming out during final approach. Selena activated the XF-18G's experimental coordination system, analyzing the fuel states and aircraft conditions of all 24 Iron Eagle's fighters. What she discovered required immediate action. 3 aircraft were in immediate danger of fuel exhaustion, while 6 others had less than 10 minutes remaining. Iron Eagle flight, we're going to execute an emergency recovery sequence, she transmitted, with the same calm authority that had guided them through the typhoon. Aircraft with critical fuel states will land first, followed by those with marginal reserves. I need everyone to follow spacing instructions precisely. There will be no second chances. What Selena orchestrated next demonstrated leadership skills that transcended technical expertise. She coordinated 24 aircraft into a landing sequence that minimized fuel consumption while ensuring optimal spacing for rapid runway recovery. Each pilot received specific instructions tailored to their aircraft's condition and fuel state. Iron Eagle 12, you're first in the pattern, she directed Morrison. Straight in approach, minimum power settings, prepare for immediate touchdown. With no go-around capability. Iron Eagle 7, you're second. Begin your approach when 12 crosses the runway threshold. Iron Eagle leader, you're third in sequence. Use the additional time to brief the remaining aircraft on emergency procedures. The precision required for this operation exceeded normal air traffic control capabilities. Selena was essentially functioning as a combination pilot, air traffic controller, and mission commander while flying her own aircraft through complex approach procedures. Lieutenant Morrison's approach to Coronado represented more than just an individual aircraft landing. It was validation that the impossible mission had actually succeeded. His Super Hornet touched down on runway 09 with less than 4 minutes of fuel remaining, rolling to a stop as ground crews rushed to provide immediate assistance. Ghost 1, Iron Eagle 12 is safely on deck, Morrison transmitted, his voice thick with emotion. Thanks for bringing us home. I'll never doubt unconventional thinking again. One by one, the Iron Eagles landed in perfect sequence, each touchdown representing another life saved through preparation, innovation, and leadership. That defied traditional military hierarchies. As the formation shrank from 24 aircraft to 12 to 6, Selena continued coordinating the recovery while managing her own fuel situation. As the final Iron Eagle's aircraft landed safely, Selena found herself alone in the night sky. Above Coronado, preparing for her own landing in the experimental XF-18G, the base below was illuminated with emergency lights. Ground crews and personnel who had watched the impossible mission unfold through radar screens and radio transmissions. Ghost 1, this is Coronado Control, came the voice of Commander Stevens, who had landed moments earlier. You have a hero's welcome waiting for you down here. The entire base is watching your approach. But Selena's response reflected the same quiet professionalism that had defined her entire career. Coronado Control, requesting normal landing clearance. I'm just bringing home the last aircraft from a successful mission. The humility in her response only reinforced what everyone already knew. They had witnessed something extraordinary performed by someone who saw it as simply doing her job well. The XF-18G touched down on Coronado's main runway at 2:31 a.m. Exactly 2 hours after Selena had volunteered for a mission that experienced pilots had declared impossible. As the experimental aircraft rolled to a stop, Ground crews surrounded it with the kind of attention typically reserved for visiting dignitaries or returning heroes. Selena shut down the aircraft systems with the same methodical precision she'd used for routine maintenance procedures, but her hands were shaking slightly as she removed her helmet and prepared to face a world that would never again see her as just a maintenance specialist. Admiral Morrison was the first person to reach the aircraft, followed by Master Chief Williams, Captain Hayes, and what appeared to be half the base's personnel. As Selena climbed down from the cockpit, the Admiral stepped forward with an expression that mixed official authority with personal admiration. "Petty Officer Rodriguez," Admiral Morrison said formally, "you have just completed one of the most extraordinary missions in naval aviation history. Your innovative techniques, exceptional leadership, and outstanding airmanship have saved 24 lives and proven that expertise comes in forms that don't always fit traditional expectations." Commander Stevens approached next, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect and something approaching awe. "Rodriguez. Selena, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond words. What you accomplished tonight redefined what I thought was possible. You didn't just guide us through that storm, you taught us new ways to think about flying itself." Lieutenant Sarah Chun stepped forward with tears in her eyes. "You saved all of us, but more than that, you showed us that preparation and knowledge matter more than rank or official recognition. I learned more about flying in 2 hours with you than I did in 4 years of flight training." One by one, the Iron Eagle's pilots shared their appreciation for leadership that had transcended every conventional boundary. They had followed Selena not because regulations required it, but because her expertise had proven superior to traditional methods when survival was at stake. Admiral Morrison presented Selena with an opportunity that would have fulfilled the dreams she'd harbored since childhood. "Rodriguez, effective immediately, you're offered admission to the accelerated pilot training program with guaranteed assignment to your choice of squadrons. Your performance tonight demonstrates capabilities that the Navy cannot afford to waste in maintenance duties." The offer represented everything Selena had wanted during her years of invisible service: official recognition, pilot wings, and the chance to fly combat missions instead of just maintaining aircraft for others to fly. But her response surprised everyone present, including herself. "Admiral, I'm honored by the offer, but I'd like to remain in maintenance." Tonight proved that the most important work often happens before aircraft ever leave the ground. Someone needs to ensure that when impossible missions arise, the aircraft and pilots are prepared to attempt them. The decision reflected wisdom that went beyond personal ambition. Selena had discovered that her greatest contribution wasn't flying missions herself, but preparing others to succeed when conventional methods failed. Admiral Morrison nodded with understanding that reflected years of command experience. "In that case, Petty Officer Rodriguez, you're hereby promoted to Chief Petty Officer and assigned as Director of Advanced Flight Operations Training. You'll be responsible for developing new techniques, training protocols, and emergency procedures based on what you accomplished tonight." The appointment recognized that Selena's real value lay not in following traditional career paths, but in creating new possibilities for naval aviation. She would train the next generation of pilots in storm-flying techniques, adaptive formation procedures, and the kind of innovative thinking that turned impossible missions into challenging but achievable operations. As dawn broke over Coronado Naval Air Station, Selena Rodriguez walked back toward the maintenance hangar where her journey had begun. The same aircraft that had been mere machines 12 hours ago now seemed like partners in an ongoing mission to push the boundaries of what military aviation could accomplish. The Iron Eagle Squadron had been forever changed by following someone they'd initially dismissed. They had learned that expertise came in unexpected forms, that preparation could overcome impossible odds, and that sometimes the most qualified person for extraordinary missions was the one nobody expected to volunteer. But perhaps most importantly, they had discovered that heroism wasn't about seeking recognition or glory. It was about being ready when people needed skills that no one else possessed. Selena Rodriguez had never wanted to be famous. She had only wanted to honor her father's memory and be prepared when someone needed her capabilities. In achieving those modest goals through years of dedicated preparation, she had become something more valuable than a hero. She had become irreplaceable. As she reached for her worn toolbox and prepared to begin another day of ensuring that aircraft would be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, Chief Petty Officer Selena Rodriguez smiled quietly. Tomorrow would bring new, impossible missions, and she would be ready for them, because that's what mechanics do. They keep things working when everything else falls apart. And sometimes, when the stakes are highest and conventional solutions fail, they climb into cockpits themselves and prove that quiet competence can accomplish miracles. The brass nameplate on her toolbox would soon read, Chief Rodriguez, Advanced Flight Operations. But everyone at Coronado Naval Air Station would know the truth. She wasn't just a maintenance chief. She was the guardian angel who ensured that when heroes needed wings, those wings would never fail them. And in the pre-dawn darkness of future mornings, as new challenges emerged and impossible missions beckoned, Selena Rodriguez would be ready. Because someone had to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.